in the last stream, we were working on setting up our new miner for uranium and our new processing setup for uranium and thorium. And then we were also utilizing this setup over here with the isotope separator and the sequential fabricator to produce LEU-235 fuel. This is the initial fuel that we're going to burn inside of our fission reactor in order to get depleted LEU fuel. And the main goal at the moment is to try and get our first pieces of californium, because californium is required in order to make quantum research. And as we saw at the end of the last episode, we can look at this quest line here to get a vague idea of how we can get to the different isotopes of californium. But the general gist here is that we're going to take a fuel like LEU-235, we're going to burn it in our fission reactor to get a depleted version of that fuel. We then get to reprocess that fuel into different fuels, and then we can take, for example, these tiny clumps of plutonium, craft them into non-tiny clumps of plutonium, and then craft that into a different type of fuel, which we can then process again. And if we do this often enough, if we run down the chain far enough with the different kinds of fuel and the different isotopes and all of that good stuff, we can eventually get to a point where the depleted fuel gets us californium. That's the plan. And thanks to a member of the Discord, who I believe is also a member of the Twitch chat, that being Ethereal Phoenix, we are going to go through LEU-235, LEU-233 to HEP-241, and then HECM-247. I did do a bit of looking between streams at the various options here, and I think this one is probably one of the best. So we're going to go with LEU-235 along with LEU-233. Then both of these combined allow us to make HEP-241, and then from there, the final one that we need is HEC lowercase m 247, which I will also bookmark. That's this one here. If you break this one down after it has been depleted, this gets us quite a bit of californium. So to do this, we are going to need 4 reactors. Initially, I was under the impression that we might be able to get away with 3, but even looking through the quest book here, I think a lot of the setups do require more than one of these initial fuels, and so we are most likely going to need 4 fission reactors, and that is where these little dirt templates come into play. So between streams, I was trying to figure out kind of the best way to fit the reactors in here, and I set up this little section here where I was thinking about how I could put the reactors, with these being the base, and of course these being the walls, and I think I'm going to go with something like this. We're going to have very wide, but very skinny reactors that are probably about 5 tall. Now, I set this up when I thought we'd only need 3, and it turns out we actually need 4. And so we could try and rearrange this to try and squeeze 4 onto this platform, but I think it's probably going to be easier, and we're also going to get bigger reactors that can burn through more fuel more quickly if we just build a 4th reactor at the back here. And so what I'll probably do is just kind of break the platform a bit and kind of extend it back far enough to add one more fission reactor to the setup. So to make all this, we are going to need more fission reactor casing. Thankfully, we did save a bunch of plastic at the end of the last episode, and so we should be able to make quite a lot of that fission casing fairly easily, and all the rest of the plastic is currently being used to make chemical research because, again, as we saw in the last episode, if we're going to actually get these fission reactors up and running, we are going to need some of these coolers. But real quick, let me go and throw down the casing and the controller for the first reactor, this one right here, and this one is going to be our LEU-235 fuel reactor. Alright, so this is kind of what the bottom of the reactor is going to look like. I haven't built it all the way up yet because I do actually want to fill this reactor. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, there are kind of 2 main things that we have to put inside of that reactor. Those are reactor cells. The reactor cells are going to determine how much fuel the reactor can burn. The more reactor cells you have, the more fuel you're going to be able to burn and the more power you're going to be able to make. And then the other thing you need is coolers. The coolers are used to cool down the reactor to make sure it doesn't overheat and melt down. So the amount of cooling you need depends on the kind of fuel you're using. The base fuel here, LEU-235, if we look at it and hold shift, has a base power generation of 10 redstone flux per tick, which I believe has been nerfed. Normally that produces more. I believe in this pack they're trying to encourage you to go through and get some of the different tiers of fuel. But it produces 10 redstone flux per tick of power, and it has a base heat generation of 10 heat units per tick. So for every one of these reactor cells, we need enough coolant cells to offset 10 heat units per tick. Now, as I mentioned before, there are a bunch of different coolers here. Each one has different requirements as to how it works. The water cooler here has to be placed next to a reactor cell block or an active moderator block. The gold cooler must be placed next to a valid water block and a redstone cooler. So it can get quite complex in terms of how you want to set it up to get the most efficient cooling possible. And that is where there's a handy website called leu-235.com. I'll put a link to it down in the description below. It looks a little something like this. And right out the gate, the website doesn't look the easiest to use, but it's a very helpful tool for figuring out kind of the best way to set up your reactor given whatever parameters you want to put in. So the way this works, at the top here, we have step 1, input the core size of the reactor. And it does specify interior. And so the way this works is you have to take the interior size of your reactor. For us, ours right here is 15 wide. The whole thing is 17 wide, but the interior size is 15. So from here over to here is 15. This way obviously is 3, and I'm going to build this 5 tall. So it's going to be 7 tall in total, but 5 tall on the inside. So back over here, we want to go with 15 by 3 by 5. That's going to be our setup. Step 2 here is to put in the fuel base power and the fuel base heat. So normally you can go to LEU-235 right here and just click normal, and that will fill in the power values. You'll see that by default, it normally is 120 redstone flux per tick, but 50 heat units. For us, ours has been nerfed. It is 10 heat units, but only 10 redstone flux per tick. So we want to put those two numbers in. Again, you can get those by looking at the fuel and holding shift in game. Then down here, step 3 is to put in the coolant rate. Again, normally you can just click this button right here that says default, this one here, and that would fill in the values. But again, all of the values have been changed for this pack. If we go back to the game here, you can find all of the values by hovering over the quest. So you'll see water is 75, redstone is 100, quartz is 100, enderium is 200, emerald's 175. You get the idea. You can find those heat units there, and then you can put that into the numbers here. You don't really have to worry about active cooling rate. I'm going to set all of these to 0. You can set up active coolers, but we're not going to bother with those today, so we can just set all that to 0 and leave it be. And then beneath that, it says max allowed. And so this is where you can kind of configure what you want to work with. So for example, if you had only unlocked lapis and redstone coolers, you could set all of the rest of these to 0, like this. And then when you run the simulation, further down here, it's going to only show you like results that use redstone and lapis coolers. For now, what we'll do is we'll just leave it as it is. We'll leave it as default. And basically, this is kind of the end of it, right? Once you've put in the size of your reactor at the top, the fuel base power and the fuel base heat, along with the numbers for the cooling rate, you can then go right to the bottom and click run. And the cooling rate has to be a positive number. Let me just make sure these are all set to 1 instead. Maybe 0 won't work actually. Try that again, and it works. So down here at the bottom, we now have the reactor. And this is not right. Hold on, let me click stop. I've done this wrong. This is X, Y, and Z. Ours is 15 wide, 5 tall, and then 3 deep. Not 15 wide, 3 tall, 5 deep. This was my mistake. But back down here, if we click run again, you'll see that we have a simulation that kind of goes through all of the possible combinations for this reactor and then picks the best one. Right now, it is optimizing for power, and that's because up here, you'll see that this button, Optimize for Power, is ticked. So at the minute, it's trying to find which combination of coolers and reactor casings will produce the most power. And you'll see on the right here that it gives us a breakdown of what we need to get the maximum amount of power. And you'll see that this reactor not going to produce that much power, 6,650, which is not a ton, but that's to be expected because the LEU-235 fuel has been nerfed. So what we want to do is we want to click stop here, and we probably want to change this to optimize for breeding. This is going to maximize the fuel consumption rate, which normally is not ideal if you're trying to get the most power. In that scenario, you could either go for optimize for power or optimize efficiency. Efficiency is, of course, going to try and get the most power with the least fuel used. But if you optimize for maximum fuel consumption, that is going to accelerate the rate at which we get from LEU-235 to depleted LEU-235, which is what we want. So if we click optimize for breeding, you can do some other stuff here. By default, it's set to X, Y, and Z symmetry. You can turn that off if you want. There's also a couple of other things you can tweak. But for us, we're just going to change the optimize for power to optimize to fuel consumption. And then we're going to click run. And down here, it's going to start running through all of the possible simulations to increase this fuel use rate. This right here is the number that we are looking for. And you'll see right now the best one is 145. It's just gone up to 146. And it's going to keep iterating until it finds the best one. This will kind of go on forever. There are a lot of possible combinations, like way too many possible combinations for it to figure out. You can leave it going for a long time, but I usually find that after like 30 to 60 seconds, you probably got a pretty decent setup that you can work with. Now, the trouble is, if we click pause here, we could go and try and build this setup, but this setup requires lapis coolers, cryothium coolers, tin coolers, and redstone coolers. And by the way, if you're ever wondering what a specific label means, you can hover over that label, and this one right here says lapis. Here it says glowstone, so it does tell you what they are. But you'll see here that lapis is the one that we're using the most of, and we've got a fuel usage rate of 150. And so what I am tempted to do here is click stop, and then back up here. If we set all of these to 0, apart from lapis, I think we can get a pretty decent reactor that's almost as good as this one, with a fuel usage rate of 150, but with just the one cooler, instead of having to unlock, 2, 3, 4, 5 coolers. Again, especially because of the fact, if we check back in the quest book here, all of these are a little expensive, right? Every single one of them requires some amount of chemical research, and as you move further up, it gets more and more expensive, with these high-tier ones, like the tin coolers, requiring 64 chemical research, which is quite a large amount. I think we're getting close to 64 over by our research area, but I don't really want to spend all of my chemical research on just the tin coolers, especially because the tin coolers have to be placed down next to lapis coolers, and so you do have to unlock both of those anyway. So back over here, you can see that with just lapis coolers, we've got to a fuel usage rate of 147, which is very close to that fuel usage rate of 150, but with substantially fewer coolers. It just went up to 148, and if we left this going for long enough, it might even get up and potentially even surpass 150. But I'm not going to really worry about it too much. I'll leave this running in the background. Let's go ahead and, I think, unlock the lapis coolers to start with. It's possible that as we go further on, we might have to unlock a different cooler, because these higher tier fuels do produce a lot more heat. You'll see that this is 750 and 780 on their base heat production, respectively, which is substantially higher than the 10 heat units per tick from the LEU 235 fuel. But we'll start with lapis coolers, and we'll see where we can go. Between streams, I have gone ahead and upgraded the mechanics research drawer with the same iron upgrade that we used for the logistics research drawer, so now this can hold up to 3 stacks of 64x mechanics research. Mostly, I was kind of looking ahead here at these endgame quests, and we do need quite a lot of 64x mechanics. In fact, we need specifically 3 stacks of 64x mechanics and 3 stacks of 64x logistics in order to complete these 3 kind of big research dumps here that get off the end of the quest line. And so I figured it was worth upgrading that now. That has caused a bit of a problem. That problem is that we're not really producing that much iron. You'll see right now, we're down at like 30 iron. Previously, we had over 10,000, I think, at the start of the last episode, so we've really been tearing through that iron. And currently, the limiting factor is this redstone furnace. These other 2 machines are doing a pretty good job at processing the iron fast enough. And so it's a bit of a detour here, but what I think I might do real quick is grab another machine frame, craft up another redstone furnace, and kind of distribute the current iron production between 2 redstone furnaces instead of 1, just to try and double up the amount of iron we're producing to keep up with the demand for steel and, iron plates, iron rods, everything that we need for all of the different tiers of research. My thought process really is if we do like this and this, we might have to turn these around actually. I probably want to make sure these are facing forward like that. At that point, we can probably just set both of these to input and output on this side here, and then there's quite a good possibility that we can use 1 item conduit here. We can set this to maybe extract on, let's say, light gray for iron, and we'll say always active. We'll put insert here, and we'll put insert here, and then we'll have these extract on, let's say, dark gray, like this, and like this, always active, extract, always active, extract, and then we'll just have this insert on that dark gray. And so the way that should work now, I think, is that the iron dust should get sent to the redstone furnaces, and then once they're done, the iron ingots should get pulled out and sent to the frame drawer. We just want to make sure this is set to round robin, so that both of these get some of that iron dust, and of course, we also want to make sure that both of these guys do get power, which we can of course do down here by just running a few more energy conduits, which we should have in here, and if we put those down there and there, we do want to make sure, of course, that we grab the augment for the redstone furnace, that being the fluxed anodizer augment here. I think invar plates is likely all that we're missing. It is indeed. We'll do something like that. And then while we're here, we might as well also get the 2 upgrade kits just to make this as fast as it possibly can be. That's 1 more aluminum gear. And boom. Nice. Let's do 1 and 2. And that should be pretty much good to go, assuming everything is working as intended here. I can't help but notice that you are not working. Oh, that's because I didn't set this to insert on light gray. That is my bad. And there we go. So we should now be producing the iron about twice as fast as we were previously, and hopefully that's fast enough to where if we come back towards the end of the episode, we'll hopefully see a decent increase in the amount of iron that we're kind of just storing passively in this drawer. Chat was right here. This one was also not set to light gray, but I have now fixed that, and so the iron is coming in. We still don't have a ton. We'll have to keep an eye on it because it might be worth potentially adding a 3rd redstone furnace to the top here. It kind of just be the same deal with the item conduits, just configured the same way with the bottom being the input and the output. But anyway, back over here, we were about to unlock the lapis coolers. So the lapis coolers require just a little bit of the chemical research, 24 in total. And then, oh, we have to tick this first. That's fine. We can tick all of these like this. I'm fairly certain that you don't have to unlock these in order, by the way. So like once you've ticked the quests, you can just go straight to tin. You don't have to unlock gold, then diamond, then tin, which is quite nice. But here, we can hand in 24 chemical and then 48 lots of 64x logistics, which is quite a lot, but we do have quite a lot of that available. We've got 152 left, so that is all good to go. And back over on the website here, I'm going to go ahead and click stop, and we're going to go with this setup. This is the one we're going to go with, and so we need to get 148 of the reactor cells, as well as 68 lapis coolers. So, let's see if we can make any of that happen. The lapis coolers are not too difficult to make, but they do require a lot of lapis. This was kind of another thing that made me choose lapis over some other options. I think cryothium is probably technically better than lapis, but the cryothium would have taken us a lot longer to make because we don't have that much cryothium coming in, whereas lapis we can get fairly quickly if we utilize this shulker data model. And in fact, we already have a bunch of lapis in here, and we're actually running a little bit low on diamonds. We've still got more than we need, of course, but we'll go ahead and we'll take all of the lapis out of here, and yet more is being made all the time, which is good. And so every cooler here requires 2 blocks of lapis, which means we need just over 2 stacks of lapis blocks to make that work. Thankfully, we almost have what it takes. We're pretty close, but thankfully it also does come in quite quickly, and we've got a backlog of the pristine shulker matter, so we should get that in no time. While we wait for that to come in, the next thing that we need, of course, is the reactor cells. Specifically, we needed 148 reactor cells, which means we're going to need 4 lots of 148, which is 592 tough alloy. Okay, how much tough alloy do we currently have? We have got 35. Okay, so we want this number here to be about 592, and so we need 10 lots approximately and start. Thankfully, the extreme alloyer that we have is real quick, and so should be able to throw all of that tough alloy together in not much time. We then do also need about 590 glass as well. Thankfully, we do have 2048 glass banked up, so that is also not a problem, and I am very hopeful that any second now we're going to start to see that tough alloy coming in. Yep, the boron and the steel has been sent over. That's good. Of course, this does have to make ferroboron first, and so it's going to go through and make a big old batch of ferroboron, and then once it's made the ferroboron, then it's going to go through and make the tough alloy, which is, it's why it's taking a second here, but the ferroboron is coming in, and as we can see, the tough alloy is also coming in as well now, and so that really shouldn't take too long. I am a little concerned that we might not have, I was going to say we might not have enough boron to get to set up 4 reactors, because of course we do have to do this 4 times in order to get down to the californium, but we might actually, we might be able to make it work, given that we do have 2,000 boron, and of course more coming in all the time as well. Let's do this, get as many lapis blocks as we can. I think that's going to be more than enough, because we need 68, so we need just 8 more on top of the 2 stacks, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like this here, I think that's what we need. And then how is that tough alloy doing? It's coming in. Let's start crafting up these reactor cells and see how many we can get. So there's 64, then 128, and then 40 on top of that should be more than what we need. So now that we have enough reactor cells, for the coolers, the only thing we're missing is the empty cooler, which requires even more tough alloy, which is not ideal. But what I think we might do here, just to make our lives a little bit easier, is if we just quickly teach our system how to craft up the empty cooler, which of course I do have to click recipe first, and then shift-click that in and make sure it has a variable. This, I don't believe, is a locked recipe. Never mind, it totally is. That's fine. At the same time, I might also do this as well and just teach the system how to make the lapis coolers in their entirety. And at that point, if we quickly request 2 more interfaces, we have 1 already. Let's request, I'll request a few more here. Let's say 5, because I think we're going to do more crafts today as well. We can put this one down right about here, set this to empty coolers, and of course make sure that we put in our variable card for the recipe just as soon as we drop down a cable, like so, for those empty coolers, like so. And then if we have 1 more interface, which we do, we can then do the same thing, let's say here, make sure that you are set to lapis coolers, and then make sure that you have the lapis cooler card as well. And yeah, now we should just be able to request the 68 lapis coolers be made for us. Real quick, my wrench is in the system, and I do need it to get rid of this guy. Let's see, though. If I wanted 68 lapis coolers, do you have the ability to make that happen? You do. Nice. One of the limiting factors here is just the speed of the sequential fabricators. They do take a second to do the crafts, and so I have made an augment here. But I'm thinking I might also go ahead and get a couple more upgrade kits. I don't know if the reinforced upgrade kits are going to be too much power. I think they should be fine, and they do give us the ability to make this just that little bit faster. Of course, much like before, it would have been even faster if we would have set these up to do like a stack at a time. But I think this should be okay. How are we doing on the craft? We have got 0 of them so far, but they are being crafted, and so I assume that over here, we should see those start to come together fairly soon. And not too long later, once the crafting is done, we now have all of the reactor cells and all of the lapis coolers that we need in order to get this going. So back over here, we need to consult with the webpage, and this is the first tier. So the first tier is basically all reactor cells with kind of alternating lapis coolers in the bottom. That seems pretty straightforward. It looks like we do something like this, 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 and this, and then every single other slot is just a reactor cell. And basically, we're just going to follow that pattern all the way up. So we're going to continue to look back over here at the setup, and we're going to do this for layer 2, this for layer 3, this for layer 4, and this for layer 5. It is symmetrical, both in all directions, X, Y, and Z. So you'll see that layer 1 is exactly the same as layer 5, layer 2 is the same as layer 4, and then layer 3 is also the same. They're also the same horizontally and vertically. You can probably squeeze out a little bit more of an efficient reactor if you turn off X, Y, and Z symmetry, but I personally find them not that much more efficient and also a lot easier to build when they're symmetrical like this. So I'm going to go ahead and build this reactor exactly as specified out on the page here, and then we'll come back and see if it works. All right, so not too long later, actually, and we have the whole thing set up here. We've got all of the lapis coolers down, all the reactor cells down, and we did start with 168 reactor cells, and we've got 20 left, which means we have put down the exact right number of reactor cells, which I'm feeling good about. So let's go ahead and see if we can't build this all the way up. We are going to need more casing to make that happen, but as I mentioned before, we do have more plastic around here, and I think at that point, the only thing we're then missing is, you guessed it, yet more tough alloy, maybe? Although we do have some tough alloy lying around. I do want to make sure I don't really leave any plastic in the system, because otherwise it is going to get used to make more research, which is not really what we're after at the moment. So whenever we do crafting like this, we can take the casings, but then we just want to make sure that we don't click this little X and put the plastic back in the system. We want to take that plastic and put it in here for future reactor building. So over here, let me grab maybe a little bit of dirt to quickly nerd pull with. And then if we use our wand, we can go boom, boom. And then the top here, of course, is just going to be something like this. Boom and boom. And if this is correct, which I think it is, we should now be able to open this up, and it should tell us the net cooling amount. So you'll see right here it says net heat generation is negative 11,900, with the cooling rate 11,900, and it should be the case that as soon as we put in our first LEU-235 fuel, that should go pretty much close to 0. Again, if we check out the page here, it says the net heating is -20. So that should be the number as soon as we put in the LEU-235 fuel. The best way for us to test that is, of course, to take one LEU-235 fuel and place it into here. Look at that, -20. Nice. So this is pretty much good to go. I think all we need to do now is take a lever, put that lever onto here. By here, I was going to put it on the front, but I guess here probably also works. Turn that on, and boom. So you'll see that worked very quickly, like very, very quickly. It produced some power for a very short period of time, and then produced the depleted LEU-235 fuel, which is good. That's what we wanted it to do. Obviously, it burned very quickly. It does say that the default processing time is 5 minutes, so 300 seconds there. Obviously, we did it a lot faster than that because of the fact that we have set ours up in such a way to burn through the fuel as fast as is humanly possible. With that in mind, this is currently set to off, which is not what it's supposed to be. I did fill this up with dirt between episodes, but we should be backing up on uranium. We're almost certainly going to want to speed up this isotope separator, maybe even get more of them. We're going to definitely probably want to look at increasing the amount of uranium we have, but this does work, and we can now take all of our LEU-235, place it into this reactor. It's going to produce a little bit of power, 4,960 RF per tick, but most importantly, it's going to produce for us that depleted LEU-235 fuel. So what we need to do now is we need to take this and we need to process it into the next tier of fuel that we're going to need. For that to work, I'll take this out. We can leave this in here. I think that's fine. Quest complete, which is good. That's this one over here. We need the fuel reprocessor. So I know for a fact that the fuel reprocessor is going to require another machine chassis. So let's get another one of these. We are up at 52 machine frames, which is nice. Fuel reprocessor. This guy, machine chassis, easy enough. And then we need 2 tough alloys, 1 chainsaw, which is actually a linear actuator, as well as 4 basic plating, which we have. And boom, we get a fuel reprocessor. So one thing we can do, you can pump into and out of the controller. So we could put a hopper on this, or we could even get an item conduit and run from here all the way around to the controller, and that would work. You can also take the power out from the controller as well. So if I were to put an energy interface on here, we'd be able to use this power around the base. Alternatively, what you can do is you can get a fission reactor port, and this basically does all the same things that the controller does, but elsewhere. And so if I were to take this, which we cannot make just yet, I need 1 more set of copper solenoids, and of course we're out of iron again, which really isn't ideal. This time, though, it's due to the lack of cinnabar, which is a problem. Why are we not getting cinnabar? It's because we're not getting lava. And the lava, I assume, is potentially due to like a crafting bug over here. Yeah, sometimes it does this. I'm not quite sure what the cause is. If I press cancel, we do have enough blaze rods, I'm fairly certain, to make this work. Yeah, we've got 2,000 blaze rods, and we're making more blaze powder. So I feel like it should work, but for some reason, sometimes it just doesn't work. I'm not entirely certain why. This is as fast as it can go, and that should get our whole system back online. It should hopefully get us more iron. But the general idea is that we could put a fission reactor port, for example, right about here, and then we could use that as the place where we pump our LEU-235 into, and then we could potentially get another fission reactor port, put that somewhere else on the reactor, potentially like here, and use that to extract the depleted fuel. Actually, though, I guess we don't want to send the depleted fuel straight into the next reactor because we do have to process it first. So real quick, let me throw down this fuel reprocessor. We're going to have to put this somewhere else once we get the next reactor up and running, because we do want to automate this whole setup, of course. But for the time being, let's go and let's get an energy exporter, which of course does require yet more output variable transformers. That is fine. Let's do this and this. And then in here, we can put in our depleted LEU-235 fuel. It's going to use 2,000 redstone flux per tick to very, very, very slowly produce the tiny clumps of uranium-238, tiny clumps of neptunium-237, tiny clumps of plutonium-239, and tiny clumps of plutonium-241. So it turns out this needs to be full before it'll actually start. That's fine. Let's make sure this is set to 5,000 so we can get the full usage out here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use only one of these things. The only thing that I think we're going to use here is the neptunium that we get. The neptunium, we're going to put into a decay hastener to make tiny clumps of uranium-233, because that's kind of the key resource we need for the LEU-233 here. So let me get a decay hastener. The decay hastener again, fairly straightforward stuff. We do need yet another machine frame, so let's do one of these. Boom and boom. And then, other than that, we also do need a few more advanced plating, which we might have backing up over here. We totally do. Nice. So if we do something like this, we get a decay hastener, and we're going to use that decay hastener. We'll put it down for now, right about here, again with another energy exporter. Boom and boom. And if we get the item conduit here, I want to extract just the Neptunium. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this to not output to the side, this to not output to the side, this to not output to the side, and then this to not output anywhere but the left-hand side. And so that should pull the Neptunium, if we set this to extract, always active, and U to insert, over into here, and that's going to process that Neptunium into uranium-233. We want to then craft that uranium-233 into uranium-233, like from the tiny clumps into the actual uranium, and then we're going to use that alongside uranium-238, which we are backing up on over here, to make the next fuel, that being LEU-233. So what we want to do here is get another compacting drawer, which should be pretty straightforward if we had iron, which of course we don't. We also need more storage drawers by the looks of it. How is this doing? There's a little bit of iron, but it's really just not fast enough. Let me quickly get another redstone furnace. I'm going to put a third redstone furnace down. Another option we have, actually, that we've not yet kind of worked on is the Signalum upgrade kit, which I think is probably worth it. It's not too expensive. 32x8 logistics, along with 16x8 mechanics and 64 production. That's actually completely fine, given the kind of things we're currently spending money on. And with all of that unlocked, we can now get the next tier of upgrade kit. This is made with diamond gears, which are easy enough. We've got unlimited diamonds thanks to our shulker data model, electrum coil blocks, and signalum ingots. So the signalum ingots could be tricky. We're turning all of our signalum into gears, which is not ideal, and it looks like destabilized redstone is the limiting factor here. Let me quickly see if we can't get a bit more signalum going. Okay, so I temporarily disabled this compactor here just so we could steal a little bit of signalum. I have gone ahead and made another redstone furnace over here, and so what we probably want to do now is see about making like 3 of these signalum upgrade kits. For that, we do need some electrum coil blocks, and we're unfamiliar with this. We're gonna have to do yet more research. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we might have to do more power research here, because I think that it is, and by power I mean transfer, I think it's going to be either MV or potentially even HV cables that unlock this for us. Unfortunately, I don't think it tells me. Oh, no, it does say transpower IEMV. Okay, so we do need the MV, which is this one. Thankfully, MV power is not going to be particularly difficult for us to unlock. 8x8 logistics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, along with 32 mechanics and 16 production. That is very cheap, probably something we should have done prior to the nuclear age of the pack. We could also look at unlocking MV conduits at this point as well, although my reason for not unlocking them is that they are the same as the integrated dynamics system. They only do 5,000 RF per tick. Ideally, these ones right here, the HV energy conduits, those are going to be the ones I think we want to invest in, because once we get these, we can then start to pull a lot of power out of our fission reactors and potentially use that large amount of power to run our electrolyzer a lot faster and get the chemical research coming in at a reasonable speed. Anyway, hopefully now we should have unlocked the ability to make these transpower IEMV first. Did I not unlock that just now? Transpower, oh no, that's not that one. That is the next one. So we need to unlock HV as well. Okay, fine. In that case, we need to get 16x64, that's fine. We need 32x8, also fine. We need 12x8, and then some utility. That is not going to be a problem. Boom, 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 boom. Good stuff. Let's hand the rest of those back in to their respective drawers. And hopefully now we can actually get these electric coils. We can indeed. So these are made with lumium. Interesting. I thought those were going to be made with electrum, but they're not. They're made with lumium. That is a pain. It means we're going to have to do the same thing over here, where we kind of temporarily stop this from making lumium so we can back up and get some. In order to make these coil blocks, we need 6 of these in total, which is a fair amount of lumium ingots. Of course, we can utilize the lumium wire here. We have some engineer's wire cutters, and we can make plates very fast with our mega metal press. And in fact, if we wanted to really, we could quickly make a metal press mold and just turn the lumium ingots straight into wires. That might even be a more efficient way of doing things, actually, looking at the recipes here, because you get 2 lumium wire per lumium ingot, as opposed to 1 lumium wire per lumium ingot. Okay, so I think 12 lumium is all that we need. Over here, we're going to make a wire press mold, and then back over here, right now we've got 2 mega metal presses that are not actually doing anything, like they're not taught any recipes, and so if we quickly swap the metal press rod for the metal press wire, and we put the lumium in, that should just get us a bunch of lumium wire, hopefully enough to make all of the blocks we need. Those are automatically imported into the system. That's fine. I'll leave both those in there for now. We can use that kind of just whenever we need rods or wires. Back over here, we'll go back to the Signalum upgrade kit, and let's see if we can't do this. We are going to use the treated sticks to maximize the number of coils that we get. Of course, we do have a ton of treated wood, and so if we do this and this, we can get 48 HP wire coil, which is enough to make, I believe, 6 electron coil blocks, which is enough to make 3 Signalum upgrade kits. Now, obviously for the 2 that are already down, we can just go boom and boom, and that does give us more augment slots, so we can make this even faster. On top of that, one thing you can do that we've not done up until now, if you want to install all of your upgrade kits at once, you can make what's called a conversion kit. It looks like we are missing 1 flux electrum ingot. We can do our ritualistic stealing of flux electrum from that researcher. You can just combine these, so you can go 1, 2, and 3, and combine that into a Signalum conversion kit, which you can then just right-click on, and it goes straight up to the highest tier. Now, the only problem we might run into at this point is power throughput, because these are already using 400 redstone flux per tick each, and obviously the energy cable that's connected to them can only transfer 500. If I do this, that goes to bang on 500. So we can't really put all of them in, because 600 just isn't plausible just yet. We could, obviously, if we wanted to, put down some more energy exporters and connect them to the integrated dynamic system directly, if we wanted to eke out just that little bit extra throughput. But for now, let's see how this goes. It does look like we're finally backing up on iron, so hopefully this is good enough for us. But we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll see how that works out. Now that we have this over here, how are we doing? We've got tiny clumps of uranium-233. We need even more tiny clumps of uranium-233. For that, though, we do have to export the other stuff here to somewhere. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a 2x2 drawer. I think our first 2x2 drawer in a long while here. For that, we are going to need some more oak. That's fine. Boom. We'll, of course, texture that to look like the rest of our drawers. Like so. And for the time being, we're just going to have all of the other stuff going to a drawer with a void upgrade to make sure that we don't end up clogging up the system. So we'll do this. We will do this. And then we'll set you to insert. We'll set you to extract. Always active. And that should start pulling all of the other stuff out of here. And that should allow the rest of this depleted Lu-235 fuel to be processed. The thing we were working on before we got distracted with upgrading our iron setup is we were getting a compacting drawer. The compacting drawer does require more regular drawers. That is completely fine. We should be able to do this, and then not a drawer controller. I want a compacting drawer. There we go. That's going to go down right about here. We're, of course, going to extract from the decay hastener, always active, into the compacting drawer. We'll give that a quick lock. And that produces for us the uranium-233. If we take 1 uranium-233 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I believe, uranium-238, that should be what we need to craft up the LEU-233. It is indeed. And so the LEU-233 is the next thing we're going to process, because we want to then run this through. That's going to get us depleted LEU-233, which we're going to get from that plutonium-239, plutonium-241, plutonium-242, and americium-243. We're making HEP-241, which is plutonium-241 and plutonium-242. Are we getting any of those over here? We are. We're getting plutonium-241 over here. So we can use some of the plutonium-241 that we're making here in the production of the next fuel, but we also need plutonium-242, which we're not getting here, and that's why we need to run the LEU-233 through the fission reactor, because that does get us the plutonium-242, which we need, and it gets us in a pretty large amount as well. Now, the good news about the LEU-233 fuel is this produces 500 redstone flux per tick, and still only has the same 10 heat units per tick of heat output, which is fantastic, because it means it produces 50 times as much power for the same heat units. And so this, if you're just looking for power generation, this is the one you want to go for. LEU-233 is super easy to make. You do have to set up a reactor that first works through the LEU-235, but this one right here, if we again check our page, is already producing 5,000 redstone flux per tick, which means in theory, if this produces 50 times as much power, we're going to get about 250,000 redstone flux per tick from the LEU-233. And we can actually give that a go. If we look again here at the top, we can keep the same reactor size. We can change the power to 500. We can leave the heat units at 10. Everything else is going to stay the same. The coolants don't change. They're all the same as well. We're going to stick with just lapis for the time being, and we're going to click run, and we'll see here that with 251,500 redstone flux per tick, that's obviously going to fluctuate because we're not maximizing for power. You could probably get even more power out of this. If we hit stop, optimize for power and run again, you can get 273,000. It's probably fairly easy to get close to 300,000 redstone flux per tick with this setup. But again, for us, we're not really after the power, although the power is going to be useful because we can try and siphon some of that power off, and ideally either store it, which might be what we need to do because it's just so much power. We might want to, for the first time in the pack, look at getting some actual power storage, like some of these higher tier capacitor banks maybe, because the power is not going to be consistent. We're not going to have a consistent 250,000 RF per tick, at least not until we get uranium coming in much faster, and at least not until we begin processing the uranium fast enough to have a constant supply of LEU-235 fuel to keep this reactor going, and then therefore a constant supply of LEU-233 fuel to keep this next reactor going. And so it's probably a good idea to have a buffer for that big burst of power to go into, and then we can try and use that big buffer over in the electrolyzer to try and even out, but also speed up the production of our chemical research. That's kind of the plan, but essentially down here we are again not going to really spend too much time running through this. I'm actually going to go ahead and stop this, and we're going to build another reactor that looks kind of very similar here. It might actually be the exact same reactor. It's not quite the same, it is a little different. This time we need 70 lapis casing and 145 reactor cells, but this is the reactor that we're going to build for our LEU-233 fuel. Okay, so not too long later, we're almost there. We've got the first 3.5 layers built inside of this reactor out of 5 total layers, but we've run out of lapis. We're completely out of it. It's coming in slowly but surely, thanks to the shulker data model here, but it's not coming in particularly quickly. Thankfully, though, the Twitch chat has reminded me that this exists, much like we've made the Mega Metal Press and the Electrode Alloyer, which are kind of these multi-block versions of the Metal Press and the Induction Smelter that allow us to make things incredibly quickly. There is also the Simulation Supercomputer. It's pretty expensive, needs 16 chemical research, which we don't quite have. We're 1 away, although 1 is processing, so any minute now we'll have that 16th research. We also need 32x64, which we have. We'll hand that in. We need 16x64 logistics, which we also have. We'll hand that in. 16x8 on the production, and then 32 on the utility. That is fine. Let's hand these back and click to hand this in. And then do we have 16 chemical? We do. We just need to take it out in the right format. So boom and boom. Nice. Okay, cool. So this is another multi-block structure that we should be able to just craft in our system. It requires 2 compressed fission casing. That is very doable. We got a ton of fission casing ready to go. I guess this is basically just a another gate, so that if you try to unlock this before unlocking fission, you wouldn't be able to. You have to unlock fission first. We do not have any machine casing. Do we have some modularium? Of course we don't. That would be far too easy. Over here, though, we can, of course, request that our system make 100 modularium for us, or 100 lots of modularium crafts. And then, other than that, we just need 1 more sooty casing to make 1 more simulation chamber, which should be very doable. Good stuff. And yeah, that should be everything, basically, after we get the modularium to actually get this up and running. And we're very close. We need 2 more machine casing, which is just 2 more modularium, which I'm hopeful is going to arrive any second now. Assuming that our induction smelter is working as intended, which it might not be because of the fact that nothing is being made there. That's fine. I'm not quite sure what's up with the integrated dynamic system today, but if we take some redstone and some iron, which is now backing up nicely, we can do this. We can take some of that modularium that is being made, and we can do 1 more of these to get a multi-block capsule, and boom, we get the one-time use supercomputer. So let's go ahead and put this down somewhere. It is a 3x3x3. I think for now I might put it down kind of right about here. Perfect. So this is the back. I assume this is item out. Oh, that's the machine controller. I put it down backwards. That is fine for the time being. What we need to do is we need to power this thing. I don't know what the power usage is, but basically we're going to take the shulker data model. It uses the same 250 RF per tick, but here, if we look in here, it takes 250 RF per tick, which is the same as in here. So we'll take this out, and we just need to place this into the input with the polymer clay. So we'll take the polymer clay, we'll put that in here. This thing is going to require power. Where is the power input? It's at the back. That is fine, because that's pretty close to our pre-existing integrated dynamics cabling. And so if we just do one of these, and of course, one of those, we can then connect that up with logic cable, like this, and like this, somewhat awkwardly, and then we can put in one of you. That should start receiving power. Again, I'm going to right-click to give it a bigger power buffer, and we'll also get rid of that extra rogue cabling there. But now, if we put in the shulker data model in here, we should start to see that this very quickly processes through the polymer clay and produces the pristine matter. And unlike before, where there's a chance that you don't get the pristine shulker matter, right here, we have a self-aware data model. With the self-aware data model, you have a 75% chance of getting what you ask for, but with this, it's a 100% chance all of the time, which actually makes it probably worthwhile for us to get another blank data model, craft that into another shulker data model, and then we can probably take this shulker data model and put it back in over here, and keep using this for either lapis or diamonds. And then if we take the new one, I think even though this new one is just basic, we can put that in here, and that is going to start producing still infinite pristine shulker matter, which we can then of course take and put into a loot fabricator like that to just keep making even more lapis. Chat is right that you can replace the gearboxes here, this one and this one, with either speed or energy upgrades. We do have some speed upgrades lying around. They are tier 1. Do we have tier 2 speed upgrades? I think we do. Are they currently like in one of my researches? They totally are. That is not really what we're after. I did kind of want all of these to be energy upgrades. That's fine though. You can take these speed upgrades, and I don't think we're going to need them necessarily, but if we were to do this and this, it will increase the power usage, but it will make it even faster at producing that pristine shulker matter. All we have to do is make sure that this is continually full up on polymer clay for this to actually work. But this is definitely going to be a good way of us getting resources going forward, and if there is anything that we need a large amount of from deep mob learning, this is going to be the way that we want to do it. And so now it's just a case of continuing to process that pristine matter until we have enough lapis blocks to make the remaining lapis coolers. I believe we crafted 51 lapis coolers, so we need to make like 19 more lapis coolers, which is going to require 38 more lapis blocks, which again, hopefully, isn't going to take too long now. All right, so I think this is correct. I'm fairly certain we've got the coolers and the reactor cells in the right place. We did make a new diamond wand here, and I'm hoping we've got enough reactor casing to build this all the way up. We do indeed. And then, just like before, we're just going to run this all the way along. We do need, of course, 45 reactor casing to make this work, so we are a little shy with the 17 that we have, but one more bench here is all that we need. 1 and 2. And then, of course, much like the first reactor, we are also going to need to get another fission controller. Let me do one of these. We've got apparently nothing required to make it, which sounds about right. We need 2 nuclear furnaces. That requires more tough alloy. That's fine. The magnesium dibride also requires more tough alloy. Also fine. Let me go request a big old batch of tough alloy again. We'll go for another 700. We're running low on lithium, of all things. Interesting. The Twitch chat did point out that what we could do here as well is we could set up a supercomputer for the creeper data model to allow it to produce these ores here much faster, the lithium, the boron, and the magnesium. And the fact that we can also use energy upgrades. Oh, did I not put a void upgrade in here? Is that the problem? Oh no, we have a void upgrade in there. For some reason, that is not extracting. Extract, always active. Are you set to insert? You're not. That's my bad. Okay, that's not working. But this does use 2,500 redstone flux per tick, and if we used some tier 2 or potentially even tier 3 energy upgrades, which we could now unlock, we could bring the power usage on that right down to make it incredibly cheap to make. Either way, for now, we're not going to be able to quite make 700 tough alloy, but we probably don't need it. I think even just making 64 here should be enough to get this next reactor up and running. We are going to have to once again go and steal some plating from over here, but that's completely fine. And then magnesium dibride is just waiting on the tough alloy. We do need to steal a machine frame again, which is now fully backed up at 64. You'll love to see it. That gets us the machine chassis. And how are we doing on that tough alloy? We've got enough for another nuclear furnace. We've got enough for the 2 magnesium dibride alloys, and that's everything for the fission controller. Nice. So let's go and throw this down in the center, which I think is like here, but that's kind of hard to tell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It is perfect. Okay, cool. So in here, we have a heating rate of negative 12,950, and that looks right. The heat here is 12,220, and the leftover is negative 30. So we should be good to go. Let's take our LEU-233 fuel. Let's put it in. I think I've done this incorrectly, though, because the power output is huge. 224,000 redstone flux per tick is real nice. But the heating there is negative 1170, which makes me think that I've missed maybe a couple of reactor cells somewhere. I also have 7 left when I feel like I should have like 3 left, not 7. So I might have missed a couple of those out because the net heat should be negative 30, not negative 1,770. As per before, all we need to do, though, to get this actually online is take a lever, place that lever down right about here. You can also put it on the fission controller or anywhere around it. And yeah, look at that. That produced a ton of power very quickly. We've got 14,400 killer RF, so that's 14.4 million redstone flux in the time it took for that to deplete. And there we go. We got the depleted LEU-233 fuel. So next time, chat, we'll come back and we've got a few things to work on. We could do with fully automating the lapis production. I might end up moving that supercomputer potentially to a new location because this is a little janky, and getting its own loot fabricator, or maybe even multiple loot fabricators because it is faster than the loot fabricator. So you might want to have more than one per supercomputer. We might also look at getting a supercomputer for the creeper data model as well to get that stuff coming in faster. We still have 2 more fission reactors to set up before we can get to the Americium, which I do want to do to allow us to get to the next tier of research. But I also want to look at getting that power storage that I talked about and seeing if we can't harness the 200 plus thousand RF per tick generated by this reactor to make our plastic faster. Obviously, I also want to automate this setup, so I want to get the uranium from here into the reactor. I want to take all of the depleted uranium, process it through here to get the next tier of LEU-233 fuel, get that automated as well. And I also want to look at getting uranium automated and it's speeding up the whole process because right now we have uranium, but if we wanted to speed things up, we would run out of it quite quickly because we're only relying on the uranium that we get from this chunk over here. And if I were to guess, there's probably not much left in here. My inventory is completely foobarred. Yeah, we're down to 73 out of approximately 200. So we've used well over half of the uranium that was there initially. So we could do with getting another infinity mine online, getting that filled with helium to produce the uranium on a unlimited basis. And on top of that, I do also want to work fairly soon on getting maybe the arc furnaces up and running as well to triple our current 50x ore processing up to a whopping 150x ore processing to just really, solidify the continuous amount of uranium that we need. The iron over here doing real well. We're backing up on iron again, which is good to see. There is a slight problem again with the cinnabar. One thing the Twitch chat suggested, which might be worth it, is potentially kind of setting up a manual, kind of crafting chain of machines for the magma blocks. Like right now we have the integrated dynamic system doing it, but the integrated dynamic system seems a little bit finicky. And so instead, if we had a dedicated pulverizer over here that we just exported blaze rods to, and then a dedicated crafter that just made the magma creams and then the magma blocks, that might be more just beneficial for us. It also seems like just the production of slag here is limiting, and that's because we're low on sand of all things, which is not super surprising, I guess. We have been using a lot of glass, so a lot of the sand will have been taken out of here and smelted into glass, but we're real low on sand. There are, of course, ways we can speed this up. We could put more upgrades in here. We could get the signal upgrade kit. The Twitch chat does also make a good point that we could look at getting maybe an igneous extruder to make sand automatically as well. There's also stuff like the manufacturing from Nuclearcraft, which, while not necessarily faster by default, you can speed up, but again, it just requires a ton of power. So we're probably not going to get the Americium next episode. We're probably not going to get the Californium next episode, but we're getting there. Slowly but surely, there's a lot of other stuff we need to do. We don't need to turbo towards the Californium just yet. There's a couple of other steps that we need to do. We need to like lay a foundation first to make sure that we can actually get an automated Californium up and running. And yeah, then after we have that going, we can look at moving on to the challenge quests and the end of the pack. But those are all problems for future Isaac. For now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Feed the Factory there.